Draco Malfoy and the Journal of Dreadful Things. Written by Little Beans 19. Read for you by Gemini Wishes. Chapter 7. Foolish Gryffindor Behavior. Draco landed with a great whoomph on something soft and oddly plant-like. He tried to make out what it was, but it was pitch black, and he couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. "I can't believe I did that," he whispered to himself, rubbing at his eyes and staring up. The trap door was only a dot of light way, way up above, like a single star in the sky. "I really can't believe I did that." Granger's voice cut through the darkness. "Is everyone okay?" She was answered by panicked screams. "What?" Draco exclaimed, quickly sitting up. "What is—" He screamed too as something coiled around his arms, pulling him down, his face smushing against the slowly wriggling thing. His eyes had adjusted well enough that he could just make out dark, twisting shapes creeping towards them all like hundreds of snakes, like vines. It was Devil's Snare. "It's Devil's Snare!" Granger cried. She had managed to escape and was backed up against the wall. "Yes! So be the clever clogs that you are and get rid of it!" Draco shrieked, trying not to struggle as a thick tendril wound around his ribs and began to squeeze the air out of him. "Oh, what did the professor say?" Granger hit her head with her hand. "Devil's Snare! Devil's Snare!" "Light, Granger! Warmth and light!" Draco rasped out desperately. "Start a fire or something!" Harry yelled. "Of course, but there's no wood!" Granger cried, looking back and forth frantically for a solution. "Have you gone mad?" Weasley exploded. "Are you a witch or not?" "Oh, right!" Granger squeaked, quickly pulling out her wand and fumbling out an incantation. Blue flames burst into existence, lighting up the room. The Devil's Snare squealed, recoiling from the bright light and dropping Draco, Harry, and Weasley. Draco scampered to the other side of the room, quickly followed by the two boys. "Lucky you two pay attention in herbology, huh?" Harry laughed, wiping sweat from his face. Draco only gave a faint groan, clutching at his surely bruised ribs. This was going to be a living nightmare, he was sure of it. "By the way, Malfoy," Weasley snickered, "you scream like a little girl." Draco let out an affronted squawk. "You shut your mouth, I do not!" "Come on, this way," Harry said, pointing down the dark, dank passageway. The four trod onward. It was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the occasional drip of water trickling down the stone walls and the scuff of their shoes. "We must be hundreds of miles under the school," Granger spoke after the silence had stretched on for too long, her voice bouncing off the walls. "Yeah," Weasley said. Then, "Can you hear something?" Draco craned his head, listening intently. Sure enough, there was an odd fluttering sound coming from up ahead, as well as a bluish light. "It sounds like wings," Harry observed. The four finally came to a stop just outside a chamber filled with what seemed to be small birds, fluttering above and glimmering in the charmed blue lighting. "Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room?" Weasley asked. "Probably. They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they all swooped at once—" "Well, there's nothing for it. I'll run," said Harry, before taking off into the chamber with his arms over his head. Nothing happened. Draco couldn't contain the snicker that escaped his throat. He really couldn't. It snuck out and turned into helpless bubbling laughter that must have been contagious, because Granger and Weasley began laughing as well. "Hey, it's not that funny," Harry protested, even though he was giggling too. The four of them promptly dissolved into belly laughs. It was strange, but it couldn't be helped. "Okay," Harry managed to wheeze through dying chuckles. "The stone. Snape. Come on, we need to focus." He approached the door and jiggled the handle. It's locked. The rest of them stepped into the room. Granger went to try Alo Mahora on the door, while Weasley stood there like a lemon. Draco looked up at the birds, and with a start, realized they weren't birds at all. "They're keys!" he announced wildly. The Gryffindors turned with baffled expressions until, one by one, it dawned on them. "Then that must mean," Harry said, looking around the room. "Yes, broomsticks! We've got to catch the key for the door." "Like Quidditch!" Draco gasped, suddenly feeling much perkier. "But there's hundreds of them," Granger groaned. Weasley squinted at the lock. "We're looking for a big, Old-fashioned one, he observed. Probably silver, like the handle. Right then, said Harry, passing each of them a broom. Let's catch that key. As soon as the four of them took off, the keys began flapping about in a frenzy, making it impossible to even catch one. There! Harry exclaimed after a while. That one there with the blue wings. The feathers are crumpled on one side. Draco spotted it immediately. Weasley went zooming after it, only to crash into the ceiling and nearly topple off his broom. Draco dove after it, swooping with all the finesse he knew he had in him. He could hear Harry and the others beginning to cheer him on as he gained on it. And then the key unexpectedly changed its course, disappearing into the swarm of keys. Draco came to a halt, scowling. It's too finicky. We need to close in on it, he told them. Right, Harry nodded. Draco, you go left, I'll go right. Ron, Hermione, you two close in from above and below. They did just that, and Harry managed to snag the key, rushing to the door and hastily fumbling with the lock. There was a click, and it swung open. Yes! Granger and Weasley high-fived. They all made their way down to solid ground. Ready? Harry asked. They all nodded. By the way, Draco, he added as they made to carry onward, you should really consider trying out for Quidditch next year. Oh, I am, Potter, Draco huffed. Believe me, I am. A giant chess set. The next chamber was a giant, ruddy chess set, towering above them, faceless pieces carved from black and white marble. And, of course, they had to play to get through to the next room, taking the spots of black knights, pawns, rooks, and bishops. The four of them soldiered across the black and white battlefield. Shards of rubble flew across the room, clouds of dust pluming into the air. Remains of pieces lay strewn off to the side. Who, by Merlin and Morgana, came up with this death trap? Draco cried out between coughs of dusty air. Draco would never admit it out loud, but clever as he was, chess was not his strongest point. It was, however, Weasley's, apparently. Draco would have found the way he ordered the pieces about, assuring their victory, slightly impressive. Only the plebeian had to go and sacrifice himself last minute to win the game. Weasley went down as the White Queen struck him, Granger's shrill scream bouncing off the walls. The animated chest piece dragged his limp body from the board, tossing him in a heap with the rest of the rubble. He was still breathing. Draco took a shaky breath as Harry cautiously moved 3 spaces to the left, the White King bowing low and tossing his crown at their feet. The remaining pieces stood aside for them, revealing a narrow passageway. Come on, said Harry. Granger hesitated, looking back at Weasley. What if he's... Oh, for Merlin's... Draco huffed. Look, Granger, he's alive. Stay with him if you're worried. But the other spells, she fretted. Hermione, it's okay, Harry exclaimed. We really don't have time for this. Try and wake him up. We'll carry on going, Harry told her, grabbing Draco by the elbow and hurrying down the passageway. It should just be Snape's and Quirrell's left, they heard her call after them. At the end of the passageway stood a pair of large stone doors. Ready? Harry asked as they reached them. Draco nodded. He wasn't really, but hey-ho. They pushed open the heavy doors, and were immediately met with a foul stench. Draco's hand flew up to clutch at his nose. Ugh, what? His jaw clicked shut as he laid eyes on the heaving body of a ginormous mountain troll. Very disgusting, very pongy, and very unconscious if the massive, bloodied lump on its head was anything to go by. Harry let out a huge sigh of relief from behind his sleeve. Thank goodness I didn't have to fight another one, he said lightly. Another one? Draco squawked, his eyes watering from how badly the room stank. Potter, what? Do you just go around in your spare time battling fully grown trolls? No, the troll on Halloween. Oh, I'll tell you later. Come on, we need to get out of this room. They shuffled around the troll as carefully as possible, Draco fighting the urge to gag every time he caught a whiff of the nasty creature. They made it into the next room, startling when purple flames sprung up behind them, cutting off the way back. Then startling again when black flames suddenly flared at the other doorway. They were trapped. There was a simple table in the center of the chamber, laden with a row of several potions and a scroll. This is Snape's room, Harry observed. He strode forwards and picked up the scroll. Draco trod lightly over and read over the bespectacled boy's shoulder, feeling a smile curve onto his face. It's a riddle, Harry groaned. Great. Yes, actually, Draco smirked, snatching the scroll from his hands. This is so much better than killer plants and giant chess sets.
Shush, Potter. I've got this one.
Draco hummed, reading the riddle thrice before making his way down the row of bottles. It really was rather easy. Did Severus actually want the stone to be stolen? Draco turned back to Harry, who was watching him curiously, with 2 bottles. Easy, he bragged, smirking when Harry's eyebrows shot up. Draco lifted the bottles. This one gets us through the black flames, to the stone, and this one back through the purple. Harry looked at the smaller bottle.
But there's only enough for one of us. That's hardly one swallow.
Draco looked. It was true. Harry was quiet for a moment, before he reached out and took the smaller bottle from him, pressing the larger, round bottle to Draco's chest.
You drink that one and get back to Ron and Hermione. Take the brooms from the Flying Key room and get past Fluffy. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really.
Draco felt his face soften.
Potter, Harry, he said, I think you might have to be the bravest idiot to ever have existed. A prime example of foolish Gryffindor behavior.
Harry laughed, seemingly forgetting about the danger ahead for a split second, and Draco's stomach felt weird and fluttery. He had the overwhelming urge to hug the idiot. He settled for abruptly thrusting his hand out toward Harry, swallowing the strange lump that had risen in his throat. Good luck. Harry took Draco's offered handshake with a small smile, shaking once, twice, thrice, before letting go and uncorking his bottle with a pop.
Are you sure you're right about this? He asked uncertainly.
Draco scoffed softly, ignoring how weirdly warm and tingly he felt. It must have been the fire. Of course I am. What do you take me for? Harry gulped and nodded.
Okay.
Here, see? Draco said, and promptly drank from the rounded bottle. He shuddered as what felt like ice trickled down his throat.
Okay.
Harry inhaled sharply and swallowed the contents of his bottle.
Now go!
Draco couldn't help but glance over his shoulder as he darted through the purple flames, feeling very beside himself as he saw Harry run through the black flames and into certain danger. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, July, 1992. 3 days later, and Harry was still unconscious. Dumbledore had informed the entire school about what had happened, leaving out the most important parts, like how Draco had been heroically involved, and that Quirrell could have never possibly been defeated without his help. Harry was still in the hospital wing when the Quidditch final was supposed to take place. It would have been Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw, but because Gryffindor had no fill-in for Seeker, the game had to be cancelled. The rumors floating around Hogwarts about the events on the 3rd floor had only gotten wilder and more unrealistic with each passing day. And Draco was having a right good time laughing as the tale got more and more twisted. It had gotten to such a point that on the 2nd day, as Fred and George Weasley were on about Quirrell having secretly been a vampire this whole time, with a chronic garlic addiction, needing the Philosopher's Stone so he could eat that much garlic and stay alive over breakfast, that Draco had stood up and very loudly announced that he'd been there and so had Granger and Weasley. Granger had looked at him, absolutely mortified, and Weasley had looked pleased as punch as students began crowding them, asking them hundreds of questions. We then had to escape on the brooms, leaving Potter behind to duel with Quirrell. Draco was telling Slytherin Table for about the 5th time that afternoon. It was quite the dramatic moment. I was fine with it, obviously, but you should have seen the look on Weasley's face. He adopted a blubbering, woeful expression, exaggeratingly quivering his lip. Now am I going to follow around all day long? The Slytherins exploded into peals of laughter.
Speaking of,
Gregory said, nudging him. Draco looked up to see Granger and Weasley dashing toward him, grinning. He's awake! Granger exclaimed. Draco gave no explanation as he shot up and rushed after them to the hospital wing. Relief flooded Draco when he saw Harry's grinning face. Before he knew it, he'd launched himself unthinkingly at the brave idiot, only registering what he'd just done when he felt Granger collide with his back, arms sprawled over the both of them in a bushy-haired bear hug. Draco felt his cheeks grow inexplicably warm as he disentangled himself with an un-Malfoy-like awkwardness that probably had his ancestors rolling in their graves. He managed to compose himself, trying not to wonder why Harry Potter made his stomach go all weirdly wibbly. Maybe he was allergic to him? Was it possible to be allergic to a person? and instead examined the collection of get-well-soon cards and sweets that had piled up on Harry's bedside table as Granger babbled on.
"So sure you were going to... Dumbledore was so worried."
"The whole school's talking about it," said Weasley, perching on the end of Harry's bed. "And I helped the whole school talk about it," Draco added, smirking. Harry laughed. Draco's smirk grew wider. "But, mate, what really happened down there?" Weasley asked, jabbing his thumb in a vague gesture toward the hospital wing doors. "The third floor," Draco figured he meant. Harry told them everything. It was quite the tale. He told them what had happened after he'd gone through the black flames, how the Dark Lord had been leeched onto the back of Quirrell's head this whole time. Quirrell had acted as a vessel. It made Granger scream, and Draco felt quite green. The voice Draco had heard Quirrell talking to had been the Dark Lord. Harry told them how he'd managed to get the stone from the Mirror of Erised and defeat Quirrell due to the fact that Quirrell couldn't touch Harry without crumbling. Literally. Harry told them Quirrell had turned to dust when he tried to hurt him. Did Draco believe him? Yes, he did. Was he more than a teensy bit disturbed at the fact? Yes, he most definitely was. Dumbledore said that Quirrell couldn't touch me because Voldemort... Both Draco and Weasley flinched reflexively at the name. Because Voldemort, Harry marched on anyways, couldn't touch me. He was smiling in a wistful way, if not a little sadly. Harry wanted to pry, but Weasley annoyingly changed the subject. "So now the stone's gone and Flamel's just gonna die?" he asked. "That's what I said," Harry laughed. "But Dumbledore thinks that... What was it? To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure." "I always said he was off his rocker," Weasley said in disbelief. "We finally agree on something," Draco drawled.
"Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Draco, how did you know it was Quirrell?"
Granger turned to him, brow furrowed. Draco blanched. He could hardly tell them about the journal. Well, he scoffed, thinking fast. "Well, I saw what I saw during that Quidditch match when Potter's broom went bonkers, and afterwards all evidence did point to him. Besides, he just seemed like a way more dodgy chap." "Way dodgier than Snape," Weasley said incredulously. "Why, yes, Ronald Weasley, and wouldn't you know it, I was right," Draco smirked, gesturing grandly to himself. The three Gryffindors burst into giggles. "You all owe me an apology," he shook his head. "To think that you all doubted me," he sighed with fake woe. "We'll promise to never doubt you again," Harry said with mirth in his eyes, and Draco felt that weird flutteriness in his stomach again. He couldn't keep the smile off his face as they chatted and joked and stuffed their faces with sweets until a very ruffled Madame Pomfrey kicked them out of the hospital wing. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, July 1992. That same evening came the end-of-year feast. The rich blue and bronze of Ravenclaw decorated the Great Hall, but Draco found he didn't feel too hung up about it. After regaling the tale of the trapdoor at least a dozen times, his fellow Slytherins seemed to have fully forgiven him. Jovial was the mood, as students happily chatted and laughed about their year, discussing what they would get up to in the summer holidays. Draco was just laughing at Gregory spilling his pumpkin juice when a hush fell about the hall. He looked where everyone else seemed to be looking, to find Harry standing awkwardly at the doorway, his black nest of hair as atrocious as ever. The fluttering happened once more, and Draco was starting to suspect something was very wrong with him indeed. As soon as he stepped further into the room, whispers erupted as everyone began talking about what they'd been talking about for the past 3 days. Defeated Quirrell with his bare hands. Dueled him out of his job.
Did anyone actually see Quirrell leave? No, really, is he okay?
I heard it was all a plot. Defeated by a firstie. Huh. Yeah, a firstie who just happens to be none other than the Harry Potter? Draco snorted. It was practically old news by now. Harry took a seat in between Weasley and Granger, the former clapping him on the back. Draco only noticed he'd been staring when green eyes met his from all the way across the ocean of students. Harry gave a small, amused wave. Draco hesitantly waved back, feeling his cheeks grow hot. Merlin, what was the matter with him? Luckily, he didn't have to ponder it for very much longer, as Professor Dumbledore chose then to rise from his golden chair at the teacher's table. The old man babbled on about the school year coming to a close, how well everyone had done, yada yada yada. Draco was far more invested in his mashed potatoes and gravy, if he was being honest. But then,
I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let's see.
Draco looked up in disbelief. The wizened wizard was smiling serenely. Then, of all things, he began awarding points like it was nobody's business. 50 to Weasley, 50 to Granger, 60 to Harry, even 10 points to Longbottom, of all people, thrusting Gryffindor right up to first place. Draco felt his eyebrows steadily climbing higher with each new gemstone filling the Gryffindor hourglass. Surely this wasn't allowed. It felt incredibly wrong. Gryffindor was roaring with delight while Ravenclaw squawked their protests loudly.
Lastly,
Dumbledore said calmly after silencing the crowd once more,
it takes a great amount of courage to risk losing one's pride and dignity, for persisting in loyalty and keeping calm in the face of flames. For this, I award Draco Malfoy 50 points.
Oh. Draco watched in amazement as green gemstones cascaded into the Slytherin hourglass, unable to think as his housemates went insane around him.
And if my calculations are correct, Dumbledore announced, then that means, for the first time in a very long time, I do believe we have a tie between houses, and that a change of decoration is in order.
Everyone watched, astounded, as Dumbledore clapped his hands, the blue and bronze Ravenclaw banners magically replaced with both the scarlet and gold, and the green and silver of Gryffindor and Slytherin. The explosion of cheering and thunderous applause from Gryffindor table was deafening as Harry and the others were engulfed by the cheering masses. All the Slytherins were busy clapping Draco on the back and whistling and hollering for him. All for him. He'd managed to get them into first place, even if they did have to share the glory with Gryffindor. Draco felt delighted, and the Ravenclaws and Professor Flitwick looked absolutely scandalized, and that made it all the more delightful. The very next morning saw everyone saying their goodbyes, packing up their belongings and readying to leave the castle. Filch could be seen begrudgingly returning all confiscated items to students, the Weasley twins merely skipping away from him with armfuls of fireworks. The 7th years had left just after breakfast to go down to Hogsmeade for one last bittersweet celebration before catching the train for the very last time. Draco was making his way up through the twisting dungeons the last time for 6 long weeks with Gregory and Vincent, when Professor Snape swept around the corner. He came to a stop before them.
A word, Mr. Malfoy.
The other boys went on ahead, telling Draco they'd save him a spot on their boat. Draco looked up at Severus. Yes, Professor? The Professor allowed the barest hint of a smile to tug at his lips.
I believe you may call me Severus, now that the year is done.
Uncle Sev it is, then, Draco said with a smirk.
I must say, Severus drawled softly, it's an intriguing bond you appear to have made with a certain handful of Gryffindors.
Draco only gave a slight shrug. He didn't know what he could possibly say to that. That his future self told him to do it? That he actually would really rather not be friends with Weasleys and Muggleborns? Because he most certainly wouldn't.
I fear your father would come knocking on the headmaster's door should anything like this happen again. He was most displeased when we informed him of what happened on the 3rd floor.
Wait, you told my parents? Draco squeaked. He had purposefully been avoiding writing them. If they had already found out... Oh, Merlin, save him. At least Malfoy's found it beneath them to write howlers. Severus shot him a dubious look.
It is against the rules to withhold information from parents or guardians. Hopefully your frog results should be enough to sway their minds.
He patted Draco's shoulder once before stepping away.
I shall see you next term, if not before.
Mother and Father will probably want to invite you over for tea, you know, he called after him. Severus only raised his hand in farewell, his dark robes billowing out behind him as he strode down the corridor. The Hogwarts Express, July 1992. Room for one more? Harry, Weasley, and Granger all looked up from their chattering. Of course, Granger grinned. Get in here. We were just talking about what the curriculum for next year might be like, and...
You mean you were talking about it? Weasley huffed. I was just trying to talk to Harry about Quidditch leagues.
Draco shot a questioning glance at Harry, who simply shrugged at him in response. "Let me guess," Draco said as he took the seat opposite Harry. "You're a huge Chudley Cannons fan, because they're the only team who sport the color orange, and you're just completely biased?" Weasley was silent for a moment, blinking at Draco, before bursting into laughter.
"You know what, Malfoy?" he chuckled. "I hate to admit it, but you're all right."
Draco quirked a brow. "I'm so glad I have your approval," he drawled. All four of them laughed this time. Draco smiled stupidly to himself and rested his head on his knees, looking out the window as the countryside sped by in a sunny green blur. It was almost the same green as Harry's eyes. Draco felt triumphant. He could mark Chapter 1 of the journal as complete. And he knew he was going to do just as well in the next year, because the legendary Chamber of Secrets being opened, a monster going around petrifying Muggle-born students that all got sorted and resolved in the end anyway. How dreadful could all of that really be? The end. The Journal of Dreadful Things series will continue.